It is indeed as if every tree in the countryside spoke to me, saying, Holy, holy. What splendor! In such a woodland scene there is calm, calm in which to serve Him. And the celebrated second movement, the scene by the brook and its eternal flow, begins. And unlike the philosopher Rousseau, Beethoven's love of nature was profoundly religious. And in the very beginning, the flow is depicted by eighth notes in the strings, very gently. And the undulating effect is in the phrasing with an unusual sort of accentuation. And the subdominant harmony is very prominent there. There it is. And here, it's such blessed calm. Beethoven's reverence for nature. And in the fifth measure, the speed of this flowing motion increases. It doubles, like so. And thus eighth notes have now doubled in our 16th note, representing the murmur of the brook. And this continuous motion is maintained throughout the entire movement with only a few momentary suspensions of its motion. And the scoring of this accompaniment, second violins and violas, and this is very novel, two solo cellos using their mutes, creating a hushed, vibrant sound. Just two celli playing an octave below the entire second violin and viola sections. It's a magical sound which you hear right from the beginning. And here is the increase, the doubling of the speed of the flow. It's barely audible. It's so hushed and murmury. And the way Beethoven voices this accompaniment is fascinating. The violins and violas play this pattern. They start each pair of notes with the higher of the two notes, while at the same time the two celli play this. They start each pair with the lower note. Etc. So they are continually mirroring one another. As close as you could possibly come in music to depicting a reflection in the water. Here is Antonio Vivaldi's depiction of the flowing streams in springtime from The Four Seasons. And you can find many musical depictions of water in the repertoire, but Beethoven's is deeper and more mellow in its basic sound. The deeper the brook, the deeper the sound, Beethoven wrote on his early sketch for this passage. And so this entire second movement plays out like a serene stream of consciousness. So wondrous is Beethoven's immersion in nature. In a way, it's a shame to break this music into pieces to demonstrate its technical construction, but it's essentially a sonata form, exposition, development, and recapitulation with a very naturalistic coda. And even though we have the two standard thematic groups in the exposition, the basic pulse and the texture of the music creates this impression of a single continuous flow of melody that passes from one phase to another, which is sort of the point of both Beethoven's organic method of composition and the depiction of this scene by the brook. Now, I must identify one prominent melody, which is a continuation of the main theme you've been hearing in the violins. And it begins with a descending figure. And the first half of this theme, very simple. It descends and then it ascends. And it will appear often. And it closes off the first major section now with that subdominant figure from the very first measure of the piece, like so. There it is. With its hint of reverence. The flowing accompaniment briefly stops, and we hear a simple but very evocative imitation of nature sounds, the rustlings in the forest. It's the rustic horn fifth echoing through the glade, and the eternal flow resumes. Here is this entire passage, starting with the descending theme. And as you heard, the tonic key of B-flat major begins to move into the dominant key of F, where we now hear our secondary theme. There's the 4 chord, the subdominant chord, yes. The theme is played first by the flute. Then the bassoon extends the theme. And you also will hear the violins trilling. They decorate the music, little zephyrs, breezes, very delicate. This leads now to a grand climax in F major, pure F major, where we encounter something of a hemiola rhythm, dividing the gentle triple meter into smaller duple groupings. Another echoey sound of nature. And the descending melody returns. And we cadence in F major, the dominant key, and imperceptibly we find ourselves in the central development section, deeper into the woods, you might say, lulled by the continuous flow of the strings. And I want to mention the relative simplicity of Beethoven's orchestration thus far in this symphony. He uses pairs of flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and horns, and the strings. And that's all, accomplishing wonders, I would say. And the woodwinds really come to the fore in this movement, where Beethoven makes the most of the flute, oboe, and clarinet's natural resemblance to the singing of birds, which he will really exploit near the end of this movement. But until then, there's marvelous interplay of woodwind song with rising arpeggios. We've moved into the key of G major. There are delicate, airy trills in the violins, gentle pulsation of horns and bassoons, all floating above and around the flow of the strings. We hear the flute and oboe in dialogue, and then they combine in a little cadenza in thirds. And the descending theme will now appear. And then unexpected modulation from G major into E flat major. And the main theme will now return, now elaborated by the range and the agility of the solo clarinet, and the eternal flow continues. And the descending theme is used now to carry us through a variety of new tonal regions. Then we move to C flat major, and ultimately through this uplifting harmonic progression. And back to B flat major by way of this very expansive and lovely dominant seventh harmony. And here is the recapitulation, and also the most complex scoring of this movement. When I led this work a few years ago, we spent a lot of time balancing all the layers of sound in this passage. First, the flow continues in the accompaniment, second violins, violas, and cello. Then there are the horns and the second clarinet. They play this in octaves, slow moving. The bassoon and the first clarinet imitate one another in rising arpeggios. The oboes echo in the distance. And all of this happening at the same time, and over all of this, a single flute gently singing the main theme before being joined by the first violins. Here's how it all sounds. And even though we perceive all of this as the natural flow, the continuation of our wondrous journey, this is in fact a technically correct recapitulation of the opening third of the movement, now, as you expect, in the tonic key of B flat major. And as the music seamlessly transitions into the coda, we move into the subdominant key of E flat major for this exquisite passage that sighs, that exudes this rapturous sense of bliss and tranquility. And Beethoven's use of appoggiaturas there, very expressive as always, leaning on the other harmonies, they create some intensely gorgeous dissonances. Those are the actual clusters of sound created by the flutes and the oboes sustaining this against the appoggiaturas of the clarinets. So exquisite and intense. And there's the famous nature cadenza within the coda. And composers have always been fascinated with musical imitations of nature sounds, and birds in particular, and national identity has never been an issue. Here's Vivaldi's Italianate spring breezes and cheerful birds. And prepare yourself, here is the unearthly beauty of the French zephyrs and nightingales of Jean-Philippe Rameau. And here the Germanic turtle doves, the violin and bassoon trills, in Haydn's great oratorio, The Creation. And now Beethoven uses 3 woodwind instruments to imitate the specific songs of 3 birds. Not just a generic sort of chirping, but an actual notated approximation of their song patterns. And he even writes their names into the score. The nightingale, played by the flute in a rhythm that's as close to free, unmeasured natural song as could be notated. And as the flute trills, the high oboe imitates the wachtel, the quail, combined with the familiar 2-note call of the cuckoo, played by 2 clarinets. And the movement ends in a state of hushed, serene beauty, with the final appearance of the familiar descending theme, to complete the scene. As Beethoven wrote, "It's as if every tree in the countryside spoke to me, saying, 'Holy, holy.'" Spiritual repose, renewal, even salvation, it would seem.